Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. This is Mark from Mark Reads Good, and today we are going to be talking about The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. When I heard about this book, I had insanely high hopes. If you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know that I love the Expanse series. The book Leviathan Wakes, the first book in that series, was actually on my 15 books I'd recommend to anyone video I did a few months ago now. I love those characters in the Expanse series. You have Naomi, Holden, Amos, Alex, Bobby, Avricella. So many characters that I just fell in love with over the course of that 9-book series. And so when I found out that James S.A. Corey was writing a new book, a new trilogy, The Captive's War, I didn't walk into this series cautiously optimistic. I was walking in just waiting to fall in love with another band of characters. Before we get into it, I want to do a quick note about the author. In case you didn't know, James S.A. Corey is actually not one guy. It's a pen name for two authors, Daniel Abraham, an already established fantasy writer, and Ty Frank is his co-writer. Ty Frank actually worked as George R. R. Martin's personal assistant for years, and during that time of him working as George's assistant, he was building out a RPG tabletop game that later became the backbone of the Expanse series. For the Expanse series, Ty and Daniel would basically just co-write each character and write their own chapters, and then they would just constantly rewrite each other's works. That way everything sounded like one unique character. There's a lot that went into those books, and these are the same guys that are now bringing you The Mercy of Gods. Okay, so let's talk about the plot of The Mercy of Gods. I'm going to keep it spoiler light, I promise. I just want to give you kind of the premise of this story so we know what we're working with. So the story is that humans have lived on this planet called Angine for 3,000 years. No one really remembers how they got there or why they are there, but this is where they've set up shop. There's a team of researchers on this planet that is working on different breakthroughs, and they make finally their scientific breakthrough, and right as they do that, this alien empire called the Carryx shows up and invades the planet. They take it over in about 5 days. They cull about a quarter of the population, and they keep the remaining humans and grab the smartest, brightest humans that are on this planet and decide to put them to the test. They ship them off to test to see how useful they can be. If they can prove themselves to be useful to this alien empire, then they will survive. If they are not useful to this alien empire, then they will be killed. Already, can we just talk about this? Already, this is a great premise for a book. It's exactly the type of premise you would expect James S.A. Corey to come up with. There's just one catch. Okay, before I get into that one thing that I just really didn't enjoy about this book, I want to spend some time talking about what I think the authors did an exceptional job doing. I don't want to spend 10 minutes just trashing on their hard work, because I think there's things in this book that they did, like I said, exceptionally well. The scope of this book is so ambitious. You have this feeling while you're reading the book that the Carryx have done this invasion and occupation strategy 1,000 times before, and you feel that very real timeline and history. There's so many things that James S.A. Corey could peel back here and branch off into other stories if they wanted to, and I think they would all be uniquely ambitious in scope because of the first take size of this story. The core mechanic that they set up of human beings being totally powerless to this alien species, and the Carryx just having absolute domain and authority over everything that is happening in the book is brilliant. You have these humans that are dealing with their emotions and trying to figure out how to prove useful to these aliens while also struggling to communicate, struggling to understand their place in things, and they're just trying to figure out how to survive minute by minute, day by day. There's a few sections in this book where it is the perspective of the Carryx, where they're kind of talking about their conquest of this planet, and it's really interesting because for them, it's not this emotional thing. They're very calm and calculated and talking about it from more of a scientific perspective, and they're referring to humans as like specimens. And so there's this detachment that the aliens have to the humans in the story, which makes you feel even more like, hopeless that the humans will somehow find a way out of this. All of these elements together, I think, build for an exceptional premise, very interesting core story mechanics. There's just one thing that is missing from this story, and that's what I want to talk about now. So great job, James S.A. Corey, on the world building and the plot and the core mechanics. You did so good, but you forgot about the character development. The characters in this book are just flat and sterile and boring, and there's not very much going on with them. There was multiple times in this book where I would be reading a section and it would be about a character, and this is like halfway. I've already spent, I don't know, 6 hours reading up until this point, and I would get to a point in the book and I'd be like, wait, who is this again? What's their whole deal? What's their motivation? How they interact with people? And that feeling just never happened during the Expanse series. There are so many times when I was reading the Expanse where it would be like Amos. There would be a situation where someone did something wrong to Naomi or Holden or some innocent person, and you knew Amos is about to show up. And when Amos shows up, you knew that he was going to handle business. And there's like this feeling of excitement with that. You're getting like excited because you know Amos is about to bust up some mean bad dude who thinks he's on top of the world. But then Amos shows up and goes, no, you're not on top. I'm on top. There's like none of that feeling of excitement with any of these characters. There's none of that deep personal interest in any of the characters' motivations or what is driving them or what struggles they have and the internal conflicts they have with one another. There's really none of that going on in this book. All of these characters are just like titles to kind of move the story along. They feel like placeholders or like NPCs, where it's just very surface level and nothing really to make you want to fall in love with these characters. And I've heard the complaint that people have said, like, well, the Expanse is like 9 books long, and so it takes a long time to build up that type of rapport. But I would just push against that and say, book 1 of the Expanse, I've recommended it to people before. People all talk about, yes, the world, the belt, all of these things, but they really talk about how easy it is to fall in love with these characters and enjoy how they interact with one another, how they're all confronted in one way or the other by each other's own individual ambitions and motivations. I mean, that is character development at its finest. And for James S.A. Corey, they wrote this new book, and it seems like they just kind of forgot how to do that. Okay, so I just want to kind of like reiterate my main argument here. I'm going to tell you the characters' names and their titles as the way I see it, and just to highlight my issues with this book. So you have Towner, the ambitious team leader, Else, his loyal partner, Jessen is the one who's struggling, David is the junior guy who gets pulled into something bigger than himself. But this is the problem I have with all of these characters. That's basically all I can really tell you about any of them. Like, there might be some little details here and there that I can tell you about them, but like, these people don't really have personalities beyond the titles that they exist in. They don't have these like human emotions that I would kind of prescribe or be accustomed to when I'm reading James S.A. Corey books. Like, for all of these characters, there are moments where you are given like a flicker, a little bit about them, but that flicker is more of a fact about the person rather than a window into their soul and what makes them tick. I keep going back to The Expanse as a comparison because it's the same authors, and I have all 9 books on my shelf. These guys are capable of writing fantastic characters, and not just main characters either. That's something I really want to drive home here. It's not that they're just amazing at writing main characters. A lot of the side characters or smaller characters within the Expanse universe are just as memorable as the main characters in that book. But they didn't seem to be able to muster that same sensibility of writing character development in this story. And I'm genuinely perplexed as to why that is. Now, I've read online that some people say that these characters are actually great, that they are understated on purpose, and that James S.A. Corey is intentionally moving away from writing about these like larger than life soap opera, space opera characters like we had in the Expanse. And that's fine. Like, if it's an artistic choice, I totally get it. It's just one that I don't jive with. It's one that for me made the book just drag on and on. And, you know, when it comes to the Expanse, all of the world building that happened in that book was more like a bonus. I wasn't reading the Expanse for, 9 books, probably over 10,000 pages. I wasn't reading all of that because of the world building. It was interesting, but I was there for the characters. And for this story, the characters are just not there. And so if it's an artistic choice, fair play. If they are just trying to set up or move this story forward and the real story is the plot and not necessarily the people that are participating in the story, okay, fair enough. It's just, like I said, not something I'm interested in. So does this book suck? It doesn't. No, it doesn't. I think that there are enough things about this book that are very unique. Like I said, you have the ambitious world building, you have the really interesting core story mechanic of the aliens coming down and invading. That whole sequence when the aliens invade and start culling all of the members of civilization, or at least a quarter of them, that was deeply fascinating. And then the humans having to figure out how to work with existing enslaved species by the Carryx, that also is very interesting. So there's like plot points and there's world building that is deeply fascinating. And I think if you value world building and, scope of story over characters, I think you'll really like this book. For people that want in-depth character development and want complex characters in general, this is not going to be a book that you're going to like. For me, I can certainly say I'm very much more interested in character dynamic than I am world building. It's why I don't really read that much fantasy or science fiction in the first place. But I was willing to give this book a try, like I said, because it was James S.A. Corey. In the future, moving forward, I probably won't be reading any more of the Captive Ward trilogy. I would still be willing to give James S.A. Corey another try when they release something outside of this trilogy, but it seems for me that their artistic choice that they're going for in this specific trilogy is just probably not something that I'm interested in. I was talking to my brother about this book because he also read the Expanse series, and we both kind of had the same sentiment, like, who are these characters, and really not caring at all what happens to them or the outcome of the story because there just wasn't that motivation that's being driven through the main characters at all. So yeah, not my favorite book. I'm definitely pretty disappointed. I was hoping I would fall in love with it. I just didn't. As always, I'll miss you. I love you. This has been Mark from Mark Reads Good. You take care.